Welcome to Two Rock Radio. I'm your host, Jeff. Now, on this episode, we're going to talk about our maple syrup operation here at Two Rock Ridge Farm. From tapping the trees to marketing our product, we're going to walk you through small to medium scale production of world famous Maine maple syrup. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and my guest, our very special guest this week, is going to be my wife, Stephanie. So I hope you enjoy, and get ready for some fun. Again, welcome to Two Rock Ridge Farm. This is Jeff and my wife, Stephanie.
Hi.
So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about how we do our maple production here at the farm and everything that we do in that process. I started this about, I don't know, I was probably 8 or 10. So that would have been in the 70s. I had a few taps out. A few cans that I got from the school kitchen for collection, and I had a few taps and some trees around, had a little plastic sled. That's how I hauled it back, boiled it down on my mother's stove. That's where I learned how to do this, the basic process. Flash forward to about, what was it, Steph?
5 years ago, maybe?
Somewhere in
Maybe
there.
6.
Okay. Our middle daughter, Anna, middle daughter, Beth, asked about making maple syrup. So basically, I dug out all my old stuff that I could find, and we tapped a few trees. We bought 5 buckets, food grade, from one of the local stores, and I set up the taps so they would drip into them, and then we started collecting. So then I needed a way to boil it down. We were getting enough so you couldn't do it in the kitchen, because what happens when you do it in the kitchen?
Very sticky.
Over everything.
Everything.
That the walls, the ceiling, people, and that's all you smell. So if you're trying to do more than maybe a gallon, if you're doing a gallon, you definitely could do it in your kitchen. You just have to watch it, because as we'll talk about later on, you can, when it gets towards the end, you can have a big mess. So back to it, we had about 5 buckets, started collecting. I needed a way to boil it down. So out behind the barn, I found a few cement blocks. And our first evaporator, if you go to our website at tworockridge.com, you'll see a picture of it. Cement blocks built into a hearth type thing that's an evaporator, with a piece of stovepipe that I found on a stone wall out behind here, and got everything together, built a small evaporator. We used firewood that we had, and the only thing we bought that year was some chafing pans is that how you say it? Chafing pans?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At Rockland Food Supply.
At the food supply store down in Rockland. What I did add to those, I went to the hardware store and I got a couple of metal handles to put on each one. So I had something to grab onto to pick them off the fire. And that's how we started. We started with that, and we worked our way through, and the first year we made it, we didn't have a finisher. We didn't have a lot of things to finish it up with, to take it all the way down to the 66 brick that you needed.
Hydrometer.
The hydrometer. That's the word I was looking for. We didn't have a hydrometer or anything, but we weren't selling it. We were just making it for ourselves. So we took it down a little bit lower, as low as we could get. Steph balled it up and canned it, and it came out great. And that's how our process started. We stayed on that process for 2 years.
I think only 1 year we
We
did
only did
that.
1 year.
Mhm.
So we did that one the first year. And then whenever you're going to do, if you get into the maple thing, it becomes addictive. Each year you want to upgrade. Each year you want to upgrade. Try something different. Try something different. The next year, I had a little wood stove that we had. So I converted that into an evaporator. And we ran that outside. Didn't have any building around it.
No shelter whatsoever.
No shelter whatsoever. Um, the problem we had with it was the wind.
We do have a lot of wind.
And so you would get a lot of cooling effect from it. So we ended up, it took,
Makes it harder to boil if it's
right.
windy. It's not hot enough.
So it took longer that year than it did the year before with just the cement blocks. So, but we got through and we did the same process. We did take it down as far as boiling it. We learned how to get it down to a little bit thicker consistency. We still didn't have a hydrometer. We were down to, we were probably closer to the 66 Breck. Um, and then Steph bottled it. Why don't you, Steph, tell them how you do your bottling at this point?
Well, it's different now. Last year we got a coffee urn, which is insulated.
Well, I meant when we first started, when you got down to the, how do you can it?
Early on.
Can it, yeah.
So I was boiling down in the house, and so it's boiling. So I treat it just like anything else with canning. You take the hot liquid, you put it in the glass jars, you put the new covers on, the bands on, and I water bathed it. But then we realized we didn't have to water bath it because the syrup itself is hot enough to seal the jars as long as the jars are very clean. And we only use new jars.
Because we ended up, you bought some of the big ball canning jars,
I did have some half-gallon jars.
half-gallon jars. Okay.
Yeah, just to store things until we could get some smaller containers because we didn't have any smaller containers because we ended up with more syrup than we thought we were going to get that year.
So basically we bulk stored it until we could get the smaller containers. And it came out to a really nice consistency that year. And I think that was the year when we actually started like, hey, we could actually like do this.
Yeah.
So the next year, now we're on year 3. I built I took a pallet, a 4x4 pallet, found a spare sheet of plywood, decked it over, and then I bought some random leftover pieces of plywood and built a small shack. And then I hooked a chain to it, and basically then I put the wood stove in it with and that's been converted into an evaporator. Put it in there, and I did buy some new stovepipe, ran it up through, and basically I built a portable evaporator in a shack that I could haul with our four-wheeler at the time. And we could move it around to where we needed it. And
that's the one that had the bucket and the copper. It looked like a still.
The
copper was wrapped around the stovepipe, but that was to warm it before it went into the pan.
Yes.
So it wouldn't cool the pan down, but it did look like a portable still.
It really did.
But it wasn't.
It really looked like a portable still. So what I had was I built everything, and then I went to one of the farm stores and I bought a stainless steel bucket, drilled a hole in the side of it, put some adapters in that I had, got some copper tubing, hung the bucket up high, wrapped the tubing around the stovepipe, and then the tubing ended just above the pans that I had on top of the wood stove.
Previously, we did not have a warmer, so we're just dumping cold sap into the hot pan, which slows the boil down.
So,
But with the warmer, you're putting in warm, and so the boil keeps going.
and the trick is to meter out with a valve how fast that drip rate is. So this is where we learned how to actually make it a continuous process. I would have my buckets, and I would take a ladle and keep ladling into the bucket. It would come down through the copper tubing and drip out it warm. The problem is, as the fire would go up and down, you had to meter it so you wouldn't steam it, so there was just steam coming out the end of the tubing. But after a little bit of playing with it, you can get it so it would be constant flow, and we got into the process. And that year was the first year we actually made 2 full gallons of sap. The other thing we bought that year was a digital thermometer so that I could monitor the temperature of the process. And when I was getting to 219, then I knew that I was at syrup.
Still no hydrometer.
Still no hydrometer, because again, this was all still for us. It was part of a process. We would give this stuff out for like Christmas presents and things like that. That's how we got to that point. And we did that that was year 3.
Just a year.
We did that for 1 year.
And then we built the sap house.
And then for year 4, we decided that we're going to do this for real. If you're going to do this for real and actually start as a selling, you need to have an actual structure, and you need to go through the process.
Inspection process.
So I'm going to
All that.
have Steph tell you about, at least in Maine, how the licensing inspection process works.
It's pretty simple. You apply to be a maple syrup processor, and the licensing depends on how many gallons of syrup you make a year. So to start with, we went with the smallest one. I think it was less than 15 gallons.
Yeah.
Maybe even less than that. I'm not sure. So we did the license. The inspector comes, the local inspector, to check out your structure and how you're doing everything to make sure it's all sanitary and safe. I think it was maybe 10 minutes for us. We had a new building, so there was not a lot for him to criticize about it. So our inspector was happy. He wrote out our license. We were licensed, and we were good to go. And it's relatively cheap too. If anyone's thinking about getting into it, I think it's
Well, for
$25
for
a
our
year.
license that we have right now, what you just paid the license, what is it right
I
now?
did, but I can't remember because we have other things on it too. Because we have the meat birds and the
Right. It's
farm stand and everything. I want to say it's relatively inexpensive,
and
and
this
it's
is
a very easy process.
it is. This is an easy process, and at least in the state of Maine, working with the Department of Ag and everything else, we've had some really good luck working with them. Once you get in and start talking to them, they almost recognize you, and it's a very easy process. They will work with you. I know there's a lot of times that people trash on the state of Maine and everything like that. In some cases, it's deserved, but in this certain case, with this department, it is very. They want to help. They are there to help, and they want you to succeed.
And any inspection that you need is the same inspector. We have the same inspector for our maple syrup, for our farm stand, for our meat sales. The only different one was the scale inspector.
Yep.
It's a different branch, but you're basically working with the same inspector for a lot of things, and it's regional.
And so that's the process. And to tell you what we had for a building, this is not like something that you would probably think of that when you go to a lot of the processes, you see this huge building. There's a lot of stainless steel. There's a lot of this.
cement floors
cement
often,
floors. I mean,
which is
obviously
great.
thousands, right? And God love them if they can do it. We couldn't do that, so we looked at what was required. It needs to be a cleanable surface. So we built, the biggest thing is a cleanable surface that is weather tight
Mhm.
and will be able to keep things clean. So we went to the mill. Our sap processing, our sap shack is 12 by 12 by 12. It is a square building made out of hemlock with a plywood floor that is a shed style roof with a door that tips up in the front that is held up with a couple of pipes. So when it's closed, it's closed. To use the building, the door has to be open and the pipes hold the door up. And it's big enough for two people to work in the building. And that's
Even
it.
with the door closed, and our door faces south. We did that on purpose
Yes.
because we often have winds from every other direction.
Except the south.
Occasionally it's a south wind, but that means it's very warm, and
That helps.
that does help the sap flow. And at that point, generally, the sap season is kind of slowing down once you switch to the south wind.
This was not a major investment. We built it in sections, we put it up. And that first season, we had the new building,
But the
and
wood stove
and we
evaporator.
still had the wood stove evaporator. We ran that. We were happy. We still weren't licensed to sell to the public at that point,
No.
but we were still working out the kinks. So we ran it again and again. That year, we put out, I think, maybe 25 taps, and we got way more sap.
Mm.
We store the sap in large food grade barrels. They're plastic barrels. Ours originally had olives in them.
Olives.
So rinse, 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 rinse. And that's what we store our sap in while it's
Right.
getting ready to process.
And currently, we can store just over 100 gallons in the barrels that we have.
135 for overflow in the transporter.
Right. We have another tank that we collect everything in, then we pump it out into the barrels. But generally, we can boil down about 80 to 100 gallons of sap a day if we boil all day.
And that is on our WB Mason evaporator. I'm shouting out to them right now. That was our big investment
2020.
in 2020, the first year before COVID.
New Year's Day, we went to pick it up.
We ordered it in September. He's a Maine. He's from Porter, Maine. It's a small welding shop. And we ordered in September, and called us a little bit before Christmas and said, your evaporator is ready. Come and get it when you're ready. So New Year's Day, we went over and drove over from where we are here in Knox County. We drove across the state and picked it up. It is a wonderful piece of technology. The craftsmanship, this is hand built, and he builds them at different sizes. Ours is what you would say, it's more than a home one. It's like I classify it
Entry level.
as an entry level commercial.
Yeah. It's a 2x4 pan.
2x4 pan with four bays with four sections in it.
Mm-hmm.
Draw offs on a true stove, wood fired evaporator with the arch is built for it.
Yeah.
And then we had to get it. The only thing was when we got it here, and the only thing you have to do yourself,
not
included, is the fire brick, and you need to fire brick the inside of it, which was not horrible.
Which sounds like it's easy. We have different opinions on this one.
It was not horrible.
It was not horrible, but I
You
was
weren't
not
the
the
one
one
cutting the brick.
bricks.
You were mixing the mortar.
I was putting the puzzle pieces together for the fire brick and saying I need a square piece instead of a rectangle.
How long did that did we do it in a day?
We did.
We did. We it probably stay start because to get the mortar at the right
because we
temperature,
put all the bricks in and lined them up and figured out what we needed to
and then
do
you laid them out on the
and laid
back of
them
the
out.
truck, and then
Hmm.
I cut and you mortared and put them together.
I didn't mortar. We we did the whole. We figured out what all the pieces that we needed. So it was 2 days, I guess,
Yeah, I guess it was 2 days.
because then we mortared
The next
on the second day.
you laid everything
So we had
out.
all the bricks in there. So basically, you're putting the bricks on the bottom and then all up the sides.
Yep.
And so you have to mortar them in there with this,
The corner pieces were the
fire,
worst.
yeah, fireproof, not really
They're
fireproof, fire
masonry.
resistant
They're masonry.
mortar.
They're masonry
And
brick.
you coat the whole thing to hold the bricks in place. You don't actually mortar the bricks to the metal,
You mortar them together,
you mortar them together.
and the process was once we get and it was designed to do this, and we knew how many bricks to get. He said more or less this is what
Right,
you
the
need,
number.
the number, and so you do have that added cost. I don't know what he's getting now because uh, things have
Right.
go things have
Prices
gone
of
up,
everything have gone up.
but at the time it was an investment we wanted to make. That first year, the first year of 2020, the COVID year,
Mm.
um, was our first year of running, and it actually gave
Right.
us something to do because everything
Which
shut
turned
down.
out to be good. We could not do like the traditional Maine Maple Sunday,
Yep.
um, because of COVID. Nobody was open. They canceled it that year, which was like kind of our first commercial year. That was a little disappointing, but we still processed and made syrup.
Out
And
of in that first year, we expanded from our 25 taps, we doubled and we went to 50.
yeah,
So we were running 50 taps, and we processed for a first time small scale niche market producer, we did 12 gallons of syrup. Now, I
right.
know that doesn't sound like a lot, but
And that was the first year we were
that
licensed
was the first
as
year we were
well.
licensed to sell to the public.
Mm,
We sold out.
we did.
We kept what we wanted for us and the family, and everything else we sold. And we basically paid that first year for half our evaporator. It went really well.
Mhm.
Um, we didn't have any problems. It the evaporator itself, I can't say enough about their product.
WF Mason.
WF Mason in Porter, Maine. I would use it. I would recommend them anytime.
Mhm.
The qual and they give you they not only they get customer service and
Yeah.
support.
Yep. He gave us his card when we got there. Said if you have any questions about how this works or it seems like it's not working the way that you want it to, just call us. We'll kind of troubleshoot and figure out, maybe it's not level or maybe your fire brick is not insulated and sealed in enough, or they were really good about customer service for sure.
So that kind of brings us to where we are right now in 2022. We ran it last year, a first full year of running it.
Also
We
COVID.
also COVID. We ran it for the first, then we expanded to 75 taps, and
Yep.
we still processed.
And we
Thing
still sold out.
and we still sold out. We also processed 3 gallons for a wedding.
Two gallons for a
We
wedding.
did 2 gallons for a wedding.
Yeah.
That the bride wanted to use maple syrup as what do you call it?
Favors, wedding
Wedding
favors.
favors.
And also name tags, basically. Your table assignment
Yes.
was on your bottle of maple syrup.
So we made all of that. It worked out really well, and that was our first full scale run up year. So that's the history of how we got to where we are right now with the evaporator and the system that we have now. What I will start now with the process. Everything starts with your maple trees. We have a small section of trees. It's not a whole forest of maple trees, it's a section between two fields. that was a leftover from a farming operation and a logging operation from years ago. But this section of trees is maybe 50 yards wide, but it's about quarter of a mile long if you add in all the fields. So that's where our trees, which is called a sugar bush, are. There is, the trees run east to west with a very long southern exposure. So we actually have a very good aspect to the sun to help make and get the trees to run. We really try to take care of our trees. We go in every now and then. We do some very very selective cutting to get dead trees out. There's a few softwoods mixed in. We pull those out as needed, but we try to keep them as a grove for stability against the high winds that we get here. Um, Trees vary in ages from probably, well, to give you the dimensions, we have some trees that are 6 inches around and other trees that the two of us, if we hooked hands, couldn't get our arms around. That's the age of some of our trees. And what we do, we believe here, other sugar bushes, other maple farms, they use a vacuum process. It's been studied numerous times through University of Maine, University of Vermont, many maple producing uh,
States.
states, universities, that the vacuum process doesn't hurt the trees. We err on the side of caution. We tap trees that we only tap trees that are 8 inches or bigger
And healthy.
and healthy, and we do not put a vacuum process on them. The way we look at it is this: the tree is a living organism, and the sap that is coming up that you're drawing off is all the energy that tree needs to set buds to make leaves for the spring. So we're only going to take what the tree will give us. It's a little bit dicey because sometimes some trees vary from
Mhm.
year to year.
Sometimes you get nothing.
Some
Sometimes you get a full bucket in a day.
in a day. So, but we feel it's better for our forest. That's how we feel. We'll take what the tree can give us. I equate it to donating blood. If the tree is willing to give up a certain amount, that's what it's willing to give up, and that's what we'll take. Some years it may be less, some years it may be more. That's what we work. We're up to this year of 2022. The most taps that we ever have put out is 100 taps. And how we tap our trees is they're called tree saver taps. They're only 5/16. You drill them into the first inch and a half, 2 inches of the tree, depending on how thick the bark is. The secret is everyone wants to know the depth. Each tree is different. What you have to get into is what's called the sapwood or the xylem. Sap doesn't run deep in the tree. Sap runs on the outside of the tree. The inside of the tree is the deadwood. The outside of the tree, where the growth rings are, that's where your sap's going to run. So you have to get through the layer of bark, the first layer, and you have to get into the xylem or the sapwood. So I have a drill that's matched to the size of my uh, taps, and I mark it with a piece of tape. So I don't go any deeper than 2 inches. That way I know because that's easy for the tree to heal up in the course of a summer and not allow ants, bugs, beetles, or any sort of disease to get into the tree. Um, if you want to do the research on this, there are hundreds and hundreds of papers online through the University of Maine, through the University of Vermont, Wisconsin, wherever, uh, anything in Canada, any type of anything in the northern tier states that produce maple syrup, all the universities have done studies on this. We just take all those studies and then apply them how we want to do it here. So we set our trees out. We go out right now. We have 80 taps out. We'll set out another 20 to get to our 100 in the next week. How we drill is we put, if the tree is big enough, we put two taps into a tree. If the tree's smaller, we'll only put one tap in. But most of the trees we tap this year, we'll take the two taps. We put two taps in, and then we have what is called drops. Now you can, and the drops are made out of a food grade tubing that's actually made for maple
Maple
syrup.
syrup. And
It
people who use the vacuum systems, you can see the tubing running through the woods and connecting like all the trees together. They kind of splice them in with the taps for their vacuum system. It's usually blue. I
Yep,
don't think I've ever seen any other color.
that's about the only thing you get is it's a
But if
clear
you
blue.
see
It's like an
blue
ice
kind of
blue.
running through the woods, that's a maple syrup operation.
We tap anywhere. We stagger where we tap. Some low, some high. You want to stay away from where you tapped the year before to give the tree a chance to heal. So you don't want to draw it out from the same place all the time. We rotate around the tree, um, and we just
But generally, you want to tap on the south side
exactly.
just because that's where the sun hits and that's the warmest side of the tree. So you're going to get better sap flow.
And
And it
that
does flow on all sides of the tree, but generally, we try to tap the south side.
and that actually it helps out because then if you come up with if you make take the tubing and cut it longer, you can set your taps higher up in the trunk of the tree. And we're actually running a little experiment this year just to see if there's any difference between taps that have been, say, at waist height against a tree compared to taps that are in at chest height on a gravity system. If you're that we have, if you're doing it with a vacuum, it doesn't matter because you're drawing that negative pressure against the tree. Um, and that's how we do it. We run them, we bring them down into a food grade bucket. The secret is putting a cover on it.
Mm,
And what we do is we drill two holes that are just big enough that the tubing will fit in below the cover. They're on the sides. Basically, we have a handle of a bucket come up, 90 degrees to that, both sides is where I drill the holes in. And that's where we put the tubing in. If you look at our website again, you will see, or if you go to YouTube and look up Two Rock Ridge Farm, there's one whole video that shows how we tap trees. Um, and it kind of you'll get a better video explanation of that. This year, we've tapped a lot of trees that we've tapped before, but we also expanded into what we probably right now we probably have 40 taps in the trees that we've
are
never
new.
tapped that are
Yeah.
brand new that we've never tapped before. Um, so and well, that's kind of a guess. It's funny how some trees will
Produce a lot of sap, and
where
other trees don't produce any or hardly any.
until
You get a full bucket off one tree, and then 3 feet away, you get a quarter of a bucket if you're lucky,
and then as the
and they're
sea
the same size.
and as the season progresses, that may change. It depends on
Mm,
how the tree, what we call, wakes up
mm,
and starts getting ready to bud. So you can tap trees and you can pull sap out of it. Once you see buds forming on the very end, if you watch the
right.
trees at the very end, when the buds start forming, you're done because that will off taste your sap. And at that point, pull the taps, you're done. So from the time the tree wakes up and starts moving sap to when the buds come out, that's your sap season. That's when you can get it.
If you have snow on the ground, a good way to tell when the trees are kind of starting to flow sap is if the snow is melting away from the trunk of the tree. That's a good sign that things are happening, things are warming up, things are waking up, and that's definitely a thing. But if there's no snow, it doesn't help you.
Because what's actually happening with the sap flow is that over the year, the roots are pulling the water and the minerals and the energy out of the ground, shipping it up, shunting it up through the trees in a capillary action. You got to remember, a tree is a living organism, and it actually has a capillary action
System.
system that will pull the moisture and the minerals and the energy that the sugars out of the ground and pull them up through to wake up the buds and make the leaves to start the process for the tree for coming out of hibernation. You do need a the best runs do occur when you have days that are sunny, non-windy, above
40.
40, but at night it drops down below freezing because what happens is that capillary action stops and the all the water
Mhm.
sap drops back down to the trunk.
Little like a thermometer. It's going up during the day and it's going down at night.
So as that goes up and
And
down,
that helps your sap flow
yep, during the
to come out of the taps
yep,
and into the buckets.
yep. Again, anyone who is a first time processor or is first time doing this, just go to YouTube to Rock Ridge Farm. We have a video up that we walk someone through the basic process of how to do this. Um, so if you've got a maple tree on your front yard, that you can tap it.
Mm.
It doesn't have to specifically be a sugar maple. You can tap a red maple, you can tap a
Mhm.
yellow maple, you can tap a rock maple, you can tap a swamp maple. As long as it's a maple tree, you will get maple sap, which you can make into maple syrup. The
Yep.
difference being is the sugar content in that sap.
Obviously, a sugar maple. It's a higher sugar content.
Exactly.
But all maple trees do the same.
Exactly.
And birch trees, which is a relatively new thing that we're
Right.
not doing, but
Birch trees do make their own sap, but that's another whole story.
yeah.
Um, so that's how we have that's our little that's what we use. um there's really not much that it's not rocket science. This is just this process has been going on for thousands of years. um Native Americans have done it for thousands of years. They were the ones that introduced the English people who came here initially. Um, how they did it, they actually just cut the tree, put a small stick in there
Oh
wheat
yeah,
as a
like
wheat point.
carved out,
Yep,
like a little spout
and it would
thing.
drop down. Um, they didn't. They would used to, and then as they worked through, they would just heat it, and that's how they would do it. The English, when they first did it, they took the sap, put it into big cauldrons. They would heat rocks to just as hot as they could get them, take the rocks, put the rocks into the cauldron of sap, and that's how they would boil it away. There's a lot of videos on the internet about the history of how sap was made into maple syrup. What the best thing about is this is a all natural sugar. It's not processed. It's something that can be done as a syrup. It can be used as a sweetener. You can drink sap out of a tree. That is a thing.
And there are places that are making like a maple soda out of the sap, I think. And also you can take it in the opposite direction and you can do maple sugar, which is not something we've ever done.
That
It's
is a long
it's a
process.
long process. So you're basically boiling it down until it crystallizes.
And then you have to basically dehydrate it.
Yeah, it's a lot. but it's a thing.
It is a thing.
And yet, I mean, nutritionally, it's kind of similar to honey, I think.
Hmm.
So it's a little different than cane sugar or, the commercial sort of sweeteners that are out there.
When when you're looking at a tree and you're wondering if you're going to tap it, if you've got a good healthy tree, you could tap anywhere on it. If you have a tree that's marginal or has some darkness to it, or it can have a soft spot to it or whatever, don't tap that tree. That tree is already a little bit marginal. Find another one. Don't let that tree have its
Hmm.
moisture that it needs so it can finish out its life.
Right. And look at the base. A lot of times, the base, the roots are up too high, and you've got the gaps, and maybe animals have moved in there, or the tree split.
Yep.
Um, we have a lot of
Double
double
branch trees.
trunk trees,
Yep.
and one side is fine, the other side's not fine. So you just kind of have to pay attention to the tree itself and make sure it's a healthy tree.
What I've done before also, those type of trees also tend to sometimes have a hollow heart. So if you knock on a tree with your hammer and it sounds a solid noise, you know the tree is through. If you get an echo, you tap on it and it sounds echoey, you know that tree has a hollow point, and you're not going to
Mm,
get a sap out
that's
of that.
that's not your best tree.
No.
You still might get a little bit, but you're not going to get a good sap run out of a tree that's started to hollow.
Yep. And I guess that's basically what our sugar bush is. Our sugar bush is. I mean, it's farming. It's farming trees and taking care of and working with
And
the.
paying attention to.
Yep. It's good forestry management.
Like
Um,
last year, we had this tree that both of us were like, "Oh, that looks like a great tree. That looks so great." 4 or 5 times, both of us. There was no top on the tree.
our
It broke
canopy our
off.
canopy is pretty thick.
And so it was like, what, 20 feet
Hmm.
up
At least.
where it broke off.
Hmm.
And both of us kept going back to this tree. Oh, why haven't we tapped this one? Because it doesn't have a top on it. You just have to pay attention to what's going on with the trees.
And some people have trouble with tree identification. I've known people that have moved here that would love to do this, and they try to do it the first year, and they'll tap an oak,
Oak tree.
or they'll tap
Getting you nowhere.
get you nowhere. The one that'll get you really easy is a ash or a beech.
Hmm.
They're very close in the same coloration
Hmm.
of a maple
And we have a lot of beech.
that are mixed in. So what we do is every year we walk through our trees and we've
In
marked them with just spray paint.
late summer, early fall,
So they
so the leaves are still on, so we know
that's a
which
maple leaf.
which trees are which trees.
And if you're wondering what a maple leaf looks like, look up the Canadian flag. There you go.
Basically, yeah,
That's it. But kidding aside, Maine Forest Service has some great information about tree identification,
they do.
going by just the bark. um, Being able to do that,
Hmm.
because as a maple tree gets a young maple tree will have a different bark than one that's
And
150
older.
years old.
I'm still not great at that. I cannot tell trees by their bark.
Locations where you will typically find a good maple to tap is stone walls. Stone walls, the old timers left maple trees as markers because they were a long life tree, so they would be a marker tree. They would be a property line. They
Mm,
whatever. So sometimes when you drill them, as you're drilling them, you will find fence wire in them, or
hmm.
old shotgun shell where it was used as a target or something like that.
We have found both.
We have found both. Um, it's a fun thing to do, to get out, and it gets you to work with the trees that you have on your property. And that's as you can tell, we yes, we are we're very much into managing our
Apparently,
property.
we're tree nerds.
We're tree nerds. Uh, we are. And that's the thing. We can talk a lot about trees, but that's about all we get on that. Okay, we've brought you through the history. We brought you through the history. We've brought you through where we get our sap from, and basically, we wanted now to talk about our process and what sets us apart from many other producers. I'm going to say right at the top, at least in the state of Maine, I know many producers. If, some of them are very close friends of mine. They have their process, and they make an excellent Maine maple syrup.
I mean, have you ever had bad maple syrup? I
Well,
don't think so.
no, no,
It's delicious, all of it,
all of it. The Maine's the best.
obviously.
Well, yeah. I mean, you got to root for the home team. But seriously, they all make a great product, and it's definitely a lot of it has to do with scale and what you're trying to do. I have a relative that lives more towards down East Maine that has a very big production,
Mhm.
almost what 2,000, 2,500 taps out,
Mhm. Vacuum
vacuum
system,
system, reverse
reverse osmosis.
osmosis, the whole process. And they make an excellent product. It's a family run operation. They do it's extremely it's well, I'll give it right out. It's Williams Family Farm down in Clifton on Route 9. They really uh, they make a great product. It's and they do a lot of things. They make the candy. They do different things with it.
Mhm. They have a huge operation compared to what
Us,
ours is.
what ours
Ours
is.
is it's very small compared to theirs for sure.
So they're all over the place, and there's many that do it. For us, we know we're at a point where we're not going to compete against them. We're not going to do
Mm-mm.
this. We need a niche market. So what we thought about is we are on a smaller scale. We'll take because there are hundreds and hundreds of backyard producers in Maine and other places that produce a very good product. So what we did is we took that backyard product, upscaled it, added a little bit of technology to it, added the licensing to it, added everything you
Mm.
needed.
Not a lot of technology though
Not
for
a lot of
us.
technology.
Do a lot of things.
Yeah,
It's a lot of physical
a
labor.
lot of physical labor. But basically what we shot for was this is your grandparents' maple syrup.
Right. Which you mentioned earlier.
Is this is the syrup that if you came to Maine in 1950 or 1960, maybe even to the 70s, this is the maple syrup that you're going to get. That's for us. And the difference, what we do is the process. Again, we don't do any of the we don't do any of the vacuum um, the vacuum process to
Mhm.
draw the sap
to
out of the
to pull the
trees,
sap
to
from the
pull the sap from
trees.
the trees. We collect by hand in from the buckets. Then when we get it to the shack, we pump it with a little transfer pump
Mhm.
from our transporter tank that we have a UTV for. Now, my father and his brother, my uncle, they used to collect sap with oxen. They would go out, they had a particular sleigh that they would use or a bunk or whatever that they would put behind oxen. They would use that to go out and collect sap to process in what they had. Um, we upscale, we don't use oxen. It would be really
Seems
cool.
like a lot of power
A lot
with
of
the oxen.
with the oxen.
The UTV is good for us,
But
we don't need oxen.
we do have a UTV. It would be cool to do it with the oxen
It would be,
if we had a pair of oxen.
but we don't have any.
We have cows. We just don't have a pair of oxen to do it.
Yeah, and if we hooked up our cows, they just spill it everywhere.
Yeah, that wouldn't be
counterproductive to their
counterproductive.
purposes.
Anyway, back on process. So basically, we go out, we collect by hand into a tank that's in the back of our UTV, bring it to our sap shack, and then we pump it out with a transfer pump into two holding tanks, into the two holding all of the barrels in that are in there, and the process starts there. Steph is great at doing this. Tell her how you fire the boiler. You set up the evaporator. She's better at it than I am.
Right. So you want to make sure that you've got enough sap in the evaporator before you start it, because you don't want to scorch your very expensive evaporator pan. So you kind of fill it up for 3 inches or so.
I put about 15 gallons into the pan.
Yeah, about 15 to 20 gallons. And then there's a warmer on the back, so that takes a little bit more.
And you have to fill the warmer with about at least a gallon.
Because you don't want your warmer empty either. And so the warmer has a valve actually that you can refill your pan with, and you can set it so that it kind of just drips out or runs out depending on how hot
but you don't
fire is.
You don't start that until you get a boil.
No, you've got to get the fire going first, and then once you get boiling in the middle, because that's how fires work, then you can maybe start a little bit of a drip from the warming pan, because as the fire builds up, it boils harder. So about every 10 minutes or so, you've got to put the firewood in once you have it started.
And explain how this works. Our pan, Steph said it's like 2x4.
2x4.
It's broken into four different troughs. Mm-hmm. So looking down on it, you have a rectangle that's 2 feet by 4 feet, and there's 4 troughs in it. The sap comes out of the warming tank.
It's all the same.
It's all the same.
It's got all the same amount of sugar in it and the same amount of water in it.
So you start the fire, and this is for us. This is how we do it.
How our evaporator works.
Is that you fire it up, you get the fire going. It starts steaming, then it starts boiling. Once you get to a rolling boil,
again, it's going to start in the middle and it's going to work its way out to the edges.
But you have to wait till it gets boiling to the edges. Then you crack the feed line, the valve from the warming tank, and that'll start a process down to one side of the rectangle or the other. And say because it works both ways, and not to get too far into the weeds, you can at some point you need to reverse it to make the sugars equal out, but whatever. So at this point, we're going to say we're starting on the left-hand side. We crack the valve.
So the warm sap is going into the left side. And the way that our evaporator works is that as it boils down, the sugars will push all in the same direction
through the channels.
So your left side is going to be your clear sap, and then it's going to get darker in the 2 middle channels. And then by the time you get over to your right side, you're going to be getting down as you boil along. It takes a while, but eventually you're going to get down to the concentrate all the way on the right side. So you have this gradient from left to right of the sap going in to the syrup, to
the concentrate. Now, when the sap goes in, it's essentially water. Water boils.
Sugar water, obviously.
So water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit. There are thermometers on our pan that
one on each side. Because we switch sides.
So the left side will show it's boiling at 212, but on our thermometer, that's 0. When we get into our process, the left side and everything is running right, The left side is boiling at 212,
which is 0
which is 0.
on our thermometer.
On the right-hand side, it is boiling up to
We want to get to 218 degrees.
218 degrees, which is 8 on our thermometer.
It is.
Because that lets us know that's when we
It's
draw off.
almost ready. That's
So-
when you start pulling it off to finish. We don't finish in our evaporator. Some people do. We do not finish in our evaporator. We're not quite at that expertise level.
And we don't want, because you do not ever, one, run a dry evaporator.
No.
We keep a 5-gallon bucket of just water in the sap house so that
sap if we have it, but water if we need it.
That if something went bad, we can dump that in and we can
Douse
cool everything
the whole
down.
thing and cool it down.
You do not want to
burn
your pan.
Anything.
Right. I'll back up a little bit. The other thing that we do different is our filtration process. We talked about we don't use vacuum sap removal. We don't do reverse osmosis. A lot of places will do a reverse osmosis process through a series
that consolidates the sugars faster.
It takes the water out.
Right. So basically they're reducing the water in the sap so that they can boil faster.
It takes less fuel to boil the amount of what you have.
Right. And ours is a wood-fired. I don't know if we said that earlier.
Right.
But we have a wood-fired evaporator.
So, and then how we filter, we do a 3-step filtering process. We use fine mesh
when we collect it into the tank.
Into the warming tank. It comes from the olive barrels through a very fine mesh.
We also filter it.
We do.
Put it in the collection tank.
I guess it is a 4-step because there is a filter in that.
Yeah. So we filter it into the collection tank, and then when we take it, pump it from the collection tank to the barrels. Then we take from the barrels, we filter it again before it goes into the evaporator.
And those are 2 fine metal mesh.
They are. Then when we drain it off of the evaporator, we switch over to cheesecloth.
And that's the draw off.
Which is even finer. It catches it doesn't catch the sugar sand as much, which is like the sediment that you see in the bottom of the maple syrup jars. If you get jars of them, they're clear. You can sometimes see a sediment in the bottom. That's just sugar sand.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of catches that. And then when I bottle, I filter again. So after we've got the finished,
it's been filtered 4 times.
I filter it again before I bottle it.
So, and the reason we do it this way is that, again, we're shooting for that 1950s, 1960s technology that we feel gives it a different flavor than it does if you're running it through. There's an X factor to me. Now, believe it, science says no. I just have we
just prefer the flavor
We prefer the flavor of it. Anyone who does wine, beer tastings, whatever, sometimes you can't explain it. It's called the X factor. You have to consider that each time you process, there's a chance that you're going to take out those minerals and the sugars that are flavoring what you're trying to process. It will make it clearer at the end. And that's what we're trying to get to, is that is our difference. When you have we bottle some in plastic, some in glass. In the glass, after the syrup sits for a few weeks, you might see a layer of sediment on the bottom. That is not anything that's bad for you. That literally is sugar. You can eat that. You can put it. Sand. That's the sugar sand. You can eat it.
It looks like sand.
It looks like sand.
It's delicious.
That's what adds. That's the minerals and the sugar that
from the
were
tree.
from the tree that was just too heavy
Yeah.
to stay in suspension. And if you shake it, it'll mix back up. After a while, it'll harden up at the bottom. And then, if you really wanted to, you could take that jar, set it into water in a pan, slowly warm it up, and it
Kind
would
of melt it down
and melt it, and it
so that
would.
it turns back into
Yep.
syrup a little bit. Yeah. But we didn't talk about the hydrometer.
Okay, we got to talk about the hydrometer.
We mentioned it a couple of times. So the hydrometer is a way of measuring how much sugar is in the sap once you're boiling down.
And you have to buy a maple syrup specific
Yes.
hydrometer.
Yes, you can't use one that's made for beer and
Wine
wine
or anything like that.
anything like that. It has to be for maple syrup.
And when you test it, and this is if you're doing it at home for your own use,
Just taste it.
ballpark it.
Just taste it.
Ballpark
You'll
it.
know.
You'll know. But if you're selling it, you have to meet state guidelines
For grading. So it has to be a specific sugar content
at 66 brick.
It
At
does.
it's
a certain temperature.
At two certain temperatures. There's a high temperature and a lower temperature, and you measure that out, and that's when you measure it. What will happen is what we do is once we do the draw off, we put it into a concentrate bucket. Then we put it onto a turkey fryer.
Yeah.
With a huge aluminum pan.
Right.
And then we take it down.
Which will only be generally about a quarter full. And we're blasting that on full propane turkey fryer heat.
And that takes it down.
You have to watch it.
As it gets closer.
So close.
And what I watch is the bubbles. Smaller bubbles, as you're fine.
Almost done. That's when you want to dip the hydrometer in when you get the tiny,
you take
tiny,
some samples.
Tiny bubbles.
Yep.
And check it and see where your bricks are.
And then as you get closer and closer, it's when you get close, you cannot leave that pot.
Do not look away.
Do not look away, because all of a sudden it will flash to large, big, overflowing bubbles. And you need to be there to shut that heat off.
Immediately.
Grab a sample, drop the hydrometer, wait for the temperature you stick the thermometer in. Yep, you're at the right temperature. Drop the hydrometer in. Yep, we're at the right brick. And that's when now it's done.
Hydrometer has its own tube. You scoop it out. It's a specific amount. That's how the hydrometer works. It's like a little test tube.
It looks like it's made out of stainless steel.
And then the hydrometer itself is glass, and it's got a weight in the bottom, and that's how it determines it's basically
the specific
viscosity,
gravity.
Specific gravity of the sugar. So it tells you how much sugar is in there.
In the viscosity at that particular temperature.
At that temperature.
So when it cools down to room temperature, you'll actually get syrup, maple syrup, the consistency that you do. Now, you're not done yet. Again, for your own use, you don't have to do this. But since we're selling it, and I don't know if in other states, but in Maine, we're required to grade it. And each year you have to get a new grading kit that you cite. It's used by site. It gives
eyeball. Yeah, eyeball it. It's by color.
By color, and there's 4 different grades, and you compare. It has a sample, and you compare it through a site glass.
3 grades.
3 grades.
Sorry,
excuse me, 3 grades.
Because we have the sample.
Right.
Yeah. So there's 4 holes.
4 holes. That's what I meant.
In the sample kit, but there are 3 grades. So it's golden, amber, and dark. So you have to and you need to look at it in the light to make sure that you're kind of matching it up.
And it should be, and it says you're supposed to do it against a clear blue sky.
Yes.
That's what it actually says, how you're going to do it. Now, there are different ways to do it as far as grading that are acceptable under the state of Maine and whatnot, but it's the cheapest, easiest way to do it.
Generally lean toward darker, I think, when you're grading.
You go on the lower side.
Golden is early season, it's hard.
to
It's
get.
hard to get golden because early in the season is unpredictable. Um, so a
Amber
lot of
is.
places don't really have a lot of golden. Dark is the most common.
That's your typical maple syrup.
Yeah, dark is your typical Maine maple syrup.
Yeah.
Is the dark amber.
But that's how we do it. And the process is, yeah, it sounds a lot labor intensive. It is. There is a lot of waiting around,
especially boiling.
especially boiling.
But it's nice because you're next to a super hot evaporator,
And
so
you
it's
do
cool.
different things. You multitask as long as you're there, feeding
bring
the
a
fire.
book. Bring a timer.
For our evaporator, every 11 minutes, an egg timer goes off, and we fire two more sticks of firewood in there.
Propane ones, we don't really know anything about the propane evaporators,
right?
Because ours is wood fired, but that's what we do. Is every 11 minutes refill the wood box.
Yep.
And keep it boiling.
And keep it rocking.
Keep it going.
And you open there is no draft control. It is full bore, right, straight, just as hard as you can run it.
No damper according to our instructions from WF Mason.
Yep.
Do not put a damper in your stovepipe. Just let it go full bore all the time.
At nighttime, if we're boiling at night, there are sometimes 2-foot flames coming out the top of our chimney.
Maybe not flames, but definitely sparks. A lot of
just
sparks.
blowing heat.
Yeah. When it's wide open, because there is a damper on the evaporator itself
to shut it down
on the bottom, so you can make that. Most often, we run it wide open. But you can shut it down. So, like toward the end of the evening, if we're like, okay, we got to shut it down, we're done. Then we can close the damper on the stove
to start cooling things down.
Or, like Jeff said earlier, throw some snow in there to put the fire out.
Yeah.
So that you can walk away and you know that everything is safe.
But don't put raw water in. If you put water in, you go very slow to just cool things down so you don't bend your evaporator.
Right. You don't want to warp anything.
Right.
The pan.
It's a process.
The arch. Definitely don't warp the arch.
No, that's stainless steel and is expensive.
Yeah.
But that's our process. That's what we do that sets us apart. We shoot for that old-fashioned maple syrup that will have sediment. And how our sap house is set up, there is just a hint because we work in steam and smoke. There is a hint.
It gets a little smoky.
You can get a little hint of smoke. And that's the other thing for us. However other people do it, we don't care. That's their process. We only use clean wood. Now, I might use sawn wood. I just went, there's a local mill that I went yesterday and picked up some hardwood edgings that were sawn off. They different milled lumber, but it's clean wood. You don't ever burn pressure treated. No. We don't use pallets. We don't use dirty wood. So the wood that you use, and we use a mixture of hardwood and softwood.
And some of it we cut here.
And a lot of it we cut here. We don't use dirty wood because we know that's the process we're going. Right. It's going into our process.
You've got to think about, like, if you're burning something and it smells gross, that smell is going to get into the syrup. Therefore, don't burn things that are gross.
Right.
Hashtag truth bomb.
Truth bomb. Well, the thing is like a lot, don't use demo materials. Don't go or anything like that. It's just.
Oh, yeah. Like, don't burn plywood.
No.
Don't burn pressure treated, like you said.
No.
Like, anything that's just, no.
No.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
No. It will, one, who knows what's in it, and two, you just don't want to taste it.
Also, you're breathing it too.
Right.
Like,
so.
I feel like that's not great.
But that's our process,
That's
and that's what we
yeah.
shoot for. We and when and do we make a lot of it? We, like I said, the
We
year
don't. We're still, I think, a small producer in the grand scheme of things.
exactly, but
Our license is probably higher than what we actually produce.
it was so cheap we might as well get what we
Right.
But
At some point, we'll get to the higher scale.
we have a following.
We do.
We have people that come back year after year
Mhm.
who want our maples that come here, and I know they also go to the other producers, and that's fine.
Mhm.
We're That's one thing about the maple business here in the state of Maine, at least. Everyone tries to help everyone out. There's no
Right.
one that it's not like a cutthroat business. Everybody
Mhm.
has their thing.
Yep.
We
If
all go to other people's places and check out their things to see how they do it.
mhm.
And other people come here to see how we do it because we're kind of a throwback.
Yeah.
Um,
And we sometimes get people who are looking for bulk amounts, and we don't have bulk amounts generally. Um, so we'll refer them to someone else
who has bigger?
who has a larger operation
Yep.
to see if maybe they have more available. Someone that's looking for a gallon. We don't sell gallons
We
at this
sell
point.
we sell the nips, which are those little ones that you
1.2 or 1.4 ounce
ounce
little
bottles.
bottles.
They're
Very
like the
cute,
um,
delicious.
they look like a little whiskey bottle.
Mm,
Then we have when we do half pints
right, 8 ounces.
in the standard
Yep.
plastic thing, but Steph puts some up. We do half pints and pints in the little plastic ones, but then Steph puts them up in
Mason jars.
mason jars.
Mhm.
So they look nice. You have that, and then we might occasionally put up something if someone wants something
If we get a
specific.
special request, we'll do a quart
Yeah,
or a couple of quarts, but
we usually have
generally that's as big as we go. We
we,
don't usually
we
do
usually
more than a
keep
quart.
some quart jars around. We've we have one
That's what
particular
we keep for us.
we have one particular inn, the inn
Mm,
down in South Thomaston,
yeah, West Keg.
the West Keg
West Keg
Inn.
Inn. They carry our syrup.
They carry our syrup, and they run it every year for their guests and at their
So
business.
they're kind of our standing order for commercial business
That's their
purposes.
big
That's their big thing.
yeah.
But West Keg Inn, stay there. They're awesome,
South Thomaston and in Nelson, they're awesome.
right?
So, um, but yeah, no. So that's our process. It's nothing. It's not rocket science. There's a little bit of science to it and a little bit of art
And a lot of time.
and a lot of time
A lot of time.
that is crunched into about 6 weeks.
6 weeks. Yeah.
That's about the run.
For when it starts running good
Yeah. Our last
to when
run
it's over.
last year, we thought we were going to be messed up,
Hmm.
and we were about ready to pull our taps. We
Hmm.
went out and walked through
Randomly,
randomly
unexpectedly, we're like, let's go see what's happening.
the last run of the year before we pulled our taps was our best run, and we
Hmm.
got almost 300 gallons of sap, and that's what pulled our
Hmm.
season out last year, and it was
For
just
2021.
yeah
Yeah.
for 2021, and it took us because we got so much in that first run
In the last run.
in the last run because now
Hmm.
the temperature is getting up and and to keep sap you really need the temperature to be down because
Right. It needs to be cold. It needs to be warm and cold.
your sap
Warm
would
during the day, cold at night.
yeah but storing the sap if you
Definitely needs to be
if you
cold.
keep sap
Yeah.
long and it's warm out
It starts to smell weird.
it starts to ferment
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
and so
You
we
don't want
had
that.
to quit what we were doing.
Hmm.
Luckily, I didn't have to go to work. Steph didn't have to go to work, and we did nothing but boil sap for 48 hours straight.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was basically
Almost
what it
three
was.
days.
Three,
Yeah.
yeah. Um. So yeah, there is a lot of work involved in this and how we do it, but I think that's what sets us apart. and we invite anyone that wants to learn about this. It is a passion of us. It starts our season off here at the farm, and basically it's kind of our key thing. I mean, it's one of our key things. It's our
Definitely the
bookend.
beginning of our season. Yeah, and then we have kind of a lull until we start planting
You're right.
everything else, and then we open in the fall generally.
For the big, our
Mhm.
farm is set up. We bookend. We don't try to compete with all the market gardens and all the market farms in the
Mhm.
summer. So we just looked at the timer, and we've gone on and on about what our process here and how to make maple syrup.
So
It is.
thanks for hanging in there.
Thanks for hanging in there. You could tell that this is a passion of ours, and I think that's what is part of it, is that we enjoy doing this. It's something we both do. We do it together. There is Steph is just as capable. I work away from the farm. She works away from the farm. I work in southern Maine at a fire department, so I'm gone for extended periods of time. If I'm gone, Steph does the whole process herself. She's just as much as in this as I am.
Or I'll start it before I leave for work, and Jeff will come home and he'll finish. So we'll start the evaporator process to be going, and then he'll get home and he'll finish.
Yeah. Um, it's
Teamwork.
teamwork.
High five.
High five.
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Go team.
Go team.
Go team. We enjoy it. It's fun. We spend a lot of time. We do the, like I said, there is a lot of monotony of doing it, but we make it fun. There are adult beverages involved, music is involved. We have friends over. We have relatives over as we're doing this
Mhm.
process.
Makes it more fun.
It does.
I mean, we're
And
still going to do it.
and
but
we're still going to do it either way.
it makes it more fun.
It does. But for someone who's just getting into it, you can do this with 2 or 3 buckets that you get
Mhm.
at Tractor Supply. You can get to and throw it. You can put a kit to
Half a dozen taps. It's not going to take you that long.
under
And you're going to make enough for yourself, like
under
your family.
under $25.
Yeah.
Under $25, you can tap some trees, get the process done, and make some, and just make it a family project.
But also beware, as Jeff said earlier, it becomes addictive. And then you're selling to commercially. You got a license. You have to buy a bigger evaporator. It builds.
It builds.
So
And once
consider this your warning.
And when you get into the community, everyone starts talking to everyone about how they do it. And
Mhm.
no one talks down about in this
About the
community.
different kinds or the different kinds of processes.
No one talks down about anything because everyone thinks everyone else's set is cool.
Yeah.
That's basically it. There's
Yeah.
no.
Yeah, there are a few other people who are around us, not that far away, and they use different methods to process their syrup.
Some people still hang buckets on trees.
And yeah, and we still all kind of have the same
Mentality.
consumers,
Right.
or the same audience who are willing to buy our stuff because they're looking at buying local.
Yeah. And that's what we do. We support each other.
Yeah, I think we said this earlier, if we don't have what someone's looking for, we'll send them to someone else.
Yep. And other people
Because
do it like, oh,
why not?
you want to go see something how it used to be done? Go down and see Steph and Jeff at Two Rock.
Mhm.
That's so. As we're wrapping this up, again, this went longer than we intended,
Mm.
but as you could tell, we're nerds about this sort of stuff, and we're passionate about it, and we just want to pass that on to other people.
For anyone who wants to try it,
We
do it.
We literally would help answer any questions. All you have to do is
Go to our website.
Go to our
contact
website.
Information's all there.
What's our website? And
what is our website? tworockridge.com.
That's
has
a
our email address on it. It has our phone number. Has my phone number on it. It has a contact form that we'll get through our website. But yeah, if you have any questions,
just
you
email
want to
us.
come visit, let us know.
Let us know. All of our phone number, the phone number to the farm is 207-542-1449.
Pay no attention to the voicemail. Still working on fixing that.
Yeah. You have the contact information. Or text us. You know, we're willing to help out anyone and that wants to just try getting into it or wants to come and see how we do it. We're open.
Yep, come hang out.
Come hang out.
Did we mention it's a long process?
So,
we got time.
We got time. So this is Jeff.
I'm Stephanie.
From Two Rock Ridge Farm in Washington, Maine. And we thank you for spending our time with us. And this is our first full up, as I feel, full up podcast. We will dial it back. They won't be quite as long, but we did enjoy doing this, and this is something we're going to do together. So thank you again, and cheers, peace.